The bones of our fathers, the bones and very mortal of our existence as man, yet crushed like brittle rosin is the memory of where we began, the ceremony and custom of distant ancestral lands. Have you forgotten me? Well, know me as I am. Hunter, killer of meat, warrior, proud and grand. Loud, feral I roar. I am man. But hear me. Hear me, brother, uncle, father, son. Hear the bones of time. Hear me, hunters, hunters. The drum. The drum is calling us out. Come, warriors, come, hunters, protector of house, oh, provider and survivor. The bones say the hour is near. But where is the ritual of the hunt? Who cries the song? Who takes the skin of blood and drinks it first, drinks it quick? Where is the dancing, where we dance our rights and become men? Who knows the way? Surely not you. Not you, beater of wife. Not you, destroyer of life, waster of land. Not you who holds himself supreme and bends not a knee for the one unseen. Not you, in all of your greatness, your cities and towers to the sky. Not you in your majestic ship that sails the distant star. Not you who cannot love a child, who cannot hold her tender and near. Not you, not now, not here. Have we forgotten what it takes to be a man? Ask our mother, our earth, our wife, sister, and she can tell you of the morning that all the men left. But listen. Listen if you will. Hear the bones of time, and they can tell us how we can become men.
Hi, everybody. I'm Clark County Commissioner Lawrence Weekly. It's my pleasure to welcome you to a panel discussion highlighting Black History Month. Ujima, Ujamaa, and Kuumba are three principles of Kwanzaa that focus on collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, and creativity. Now, today, we're going to examine the Black experience in America through these three lenses. We'll also talk about education, touching on desegregation and equality, and the evolution of historically Black colleges and universities and what their presence and purpose means to Black families. We'll also delve into how academics set the foundation for entrepreneurship as we look at our new marijuana industry. The very drug that once sent Black boys and young men to jail is now a legitimate income source, but only if you can afford to enter the game. And we'll also look at how one gentleman has done just that and is using his platform to build a community that some say drugs tortured. Last, we'll wrap these three aspects and the cornucopia of the Black experience in America in the arts, because through spoken word, music, dance, painting, sculpting, and literature, our stories have been told for decades. With me today for this conversation, our community icon, longtime Las Vegas educator, Eva Simmons. UNLV adjunct professor in gender and sexuality studies and African American Studies, Dr. Valerie Taylor, and Mr. Larry Smith, CEO of G5 Cultivation, the first African American licensed medical marijuana cultivation farm in Clark County. We'll also have the artistic talent of County Poet Laureate Vogue Robinson and the county's alternate Poet Laureate Rodney Lee, who delivered that powerful opening piece. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. So excited on this conversation here today, and I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Simmons. You know, being one of the first African-American students to enter into the University of Texas at Austin, after, you know, all had taken place and many had to knock down a lot of doors, give me your experience walking on that campus first day of school.
It was a big deal, and actually I got the shock of my life because the university provided a boot camp for incoming freshmen. And much to my surprise, my mother let me go. And so we went to this camp. It was a Girl Scout camp. And then my first day on the campus, as I'm walking across the mall, I see the counselor for my group, and I was glad to see somebody that I knew. So I said, "Hi, Carl." And he looked at me like I was no one he had ever seen. And I thought, uh-oh, something's going on here. Growing up in a segregated community all of my life, as a young kid, even when I entered the University of Texas, I was not fully aware of the impact and the nuances of being in a forced, segregated setting. It was not until we started the sit-ins and things that I gained a new awareness.
Now, fast forwarding to 2018 and looking at our generation that we have today, how do we get them to understand what segregation was really about and what it was really like when all you had was who you had?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think parents and grandparents and teachers and preachers and all of them need to share their experiences with our young people. My husband and I did with our children. It's unbelievable to them. We all share those experiences with our grandchildren, and it's unbelievable to them. But my grandson, who reads everything and watches all of the whatever on the phone and the TV, he is very knowledgeable, and I can have a real conversation with him.
It's amazing. Dr. Taylor, I can tell you when you listen to a story like Dr. Simmons and hear where she's come from and having to take those first steps, and you know, we've seen a lot of videos and documentaries, and knowing your background and your education, and you've done extensive studies, if you will, on African American history. How does that make you feel to know you're sitting right next to history?
I think what she had to say was powerful, and we only heard a very, very, very small snippet. And I immediately think of the value of story and the value of firsthand story. Mm-hmm. And you sharing your story, as I know you have with your students, I'm sure with many of the UNLV students when you were there, has probably left the biggest impact, more than taking a class on African American history or American history will ever leave. Since you, just what you said, I could hear it in your voice, right? It's still there. It was a very powerful moment when you were being courageous in a way that many of us don't even have to think about doing. And I want to just thank you because you are the reason that I have had the opportunity to make choices, right? And that's something that you really can't explain to students or to other folks who really haven't given it much thought. But I do know it's because you were very courageous that you were able to do the things that you did and allow all of us to sit here and have this conversation.
I love the fact we just kind of witnessed a kind of a torch passing kind of ceremony here. Pretty amazing here. But what intrigued you so much about African American studies that you wanted to go and study our history and really put some black girl magic on it?
it's funny you say that. It's being a black girl, right? Like, and not being able to say where I came from, not knowing much about my history, and loving history. You know, loving the story of Anne Frank, and not that I loved what experience she had, but understanding that that was someone's truth. That sparked something in me, and realizing I didn't really know much about my own history. So I've always been very interested in learning about my history, and so in doing that, I decided, okay, I'm going to give voice to telling other people about my history, their history, and our collective history, which I don't think many of us think of as collective history.
Yeah, we started out this show here today with an explosive piece from Rodney Lee, who spoke to the man and how to stand up and be that man. Don't talk about it, be about it. When you've done your research and when you work with students, particularly black males, what do you get from them today in terms of being courageous and understanding the essence of the man?
Well, it's interesting because I teach at UNLV, which is a minority serving institution. And I'm very privileged because many of my students look like me by the nature of the courses that I teach. And what I get is this fascinating interest in who they are, interest in the world. But I also get a sense of responsibility that many of them have expressed. So I feel that somebody's getting through to our black boys. I also feel that our black girls are also being heard a little more, even though we need to be listening to them even more so. So I think the conversations that I'm privy to is that there's this quest for knowledge, there's real interest in thinking about future and thinking about their place in the future, their role that they can play both in business or in education or as an entrepreneur or sort of even as a parent. I think those are the things that are uplifted from their own experiences. And many of my students, they range from the 18-year-old, I'm always like, oh, the babies when someone turns 18 in my class, my goodness, to I've had students who've been in their 60s. So you can imagine the range of experiences that have been expressed.
All right, there you go. And Larry Smith, how you doing, man?
I'm good, brother.
Listen, let me tell you something. It's an honor to have you here and to talk about your journey and your experience. But we started off talking about 3 principles in Kwanzaa, although we know there are 7. We talked about Ujamaa, and Kuumba, collective work responsibility, cooperative economics. What's one of those things that relate most to you?
You know, I'm listening to this young lady speak, and you know, that really touches my soul because I do, you know, being a young African-American male coming from where I come from and hearing a story like that, there's a huge responsibility that I have to make sure that we pass what she's given to us on down. And, you know, I think about those responsibilities. I take them very seriously in our community. You know, just having a responsibility and knowing that other people are watching, even when I don't think they're watching, I know that people are watching, and making sure that I put my best foot forward all the time is one of the things that I like to equate. But like hearing her story really does touch me, and
very inspiring.
Yeah, lets me know that what she did gave a young man like me the opportunity, and it's my responsibility, that word again, responsibility, to be able to pass that down from our generation. And I think that's our biggest thing. For me, it is.
Yeah. But now I want to touch bases. I want to delve into something that you're into in terms of your business aspect. You've entered into the marijuana industry.
Yeah, cannabis. I like to say cannabis now.
Cannabis. Cannabis,
that's
folks.
right.
All right, cannabis.
Well, you know, cannabis is marijuana is associated with arrest.
Okay.
And cannabis is associated with business.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that
It's weird how we see things from a different perspective when it comes to that. But now let me ask you this, because we also touch bases on a number of men and young men are incarcerated because of their activities dealing with cannabis, as you would put it. Do you feel like with you being in this industry now legally, that you are your brother's keeper? Because you are probably one of the most philanthropic individuals that go back and grab a number of these young men who more than likely, if they didn't have good positive mentors and role models in their presence, would probably find themselves in the justice system.
I get very frustrated with the situation of the people that are incarcerated for this plant. The more I've learned so much from this plant, these young ladies, we call them, they're all females, and I've learned so much from the plant. And to think that someone has been incarcerated for growing this plant is asinine to me. What I want to do in the future is I want to stop that. I want to start teaching our young men and women that they can learn to grow this plant. There's a lot of things that we can start doing to help get those from prison to pipeline situations taken care of. Let's start getting our kids into biology, science, because all of those things equate to this plant. There's so many things that we can do to help our kids to get off that train.
Here today in education, you educators talk about STEM. In the marijuana cannabis business, you all call it STEAM. Tell us about STEAM, and then we're going to go back and talk about STEM. Okay. Then and now, yes. Well, STEAM.
Well, for me, once again, we want to be able to educate our kids and show them that you can take this plant. There's so many things that we can do. There's hemp. There's biology. There's so many sciences to this plant that I feel like our kids need to be a part of that. And besides playing basketball, football, I want them to understand that there's other options for them to take to be a part of this industry, not just an owner per se. A lot of people are like, I want to be on the ownership side, but there's a lot of things that we can have our kids come into this and make a great living and be proud of themselves and contribute to maybe the next curing of a disease. So, I mean, it's a lot of things that take place.
Pick up the steam.
That's right.
And let's get moving.
That's right.
There you go. Ms. Simmons, when we think of how far we've come, have we really made some great progress in education? Or have we been spinning our wheels, in your opinion?
I think we have made great progress. We still have a long way to go.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's grounded in education, but it's impacted by the social mores that I think we deal with, attitudes, practices, those kinds of things. Even our feelings of self-worth impact our ability to progress. I volunteer at my school, and I love it. I'm working with a 4th grade class this year, and as I look at the little children and the groups that I work with, I pick up on things. Yesterday, for example, I was coaching my little group on editing a little essay they had written. And there was one young man in the group, when it was his turn to be pulled aside for the essay, he was all uptight and tense. He had a frown in his brow. Finally, I figured out he doesn't want my help with editing his essay. So I said to him, "You don't want my help, do you?" He said, "No, I don't." I said, "Okay, that's fine. You go back to your spot and I'll work with somebody who wants my help." So you deal with all kinds of things and you have to be aware.
Yeah.
Another young lady in the group, for whatever reason, we were pulling words from the chapter that she needed to understand more fully the meaning of those words. And she drifted off to tell me that her dad was in prison. She pulled up his mugshot on the Chromebook, they call it. And I'm still concerned about that because she doesn't know me that well. I don't know her parents, so there's some impelling reason that she shared that part of her life story. And so as educators and as people wanting to move forward, we need to be cognizant of a whole spectrum of things.
Do you think we're a little out of touch with this generation?
In some cases, absolutely,
Yeah.
especially these millennials.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Got to keep up.
Got to keep up.
Got to keep up. Dr. Taylor, do you feel like this generation is lost? Do you feel like this millennial group is out of touch? Do you think, like, for example, describing the students that Ms. Simmons spoke about, what do you think the gap comes into play here?
Actually, I want to circle back to something you had said about opportunity, right? And you mentioned STEAM.
STEAM.
And so just to make sure we round it out, it's science, technology, engineering, and most folks know of math.
Yeah.
But art is what the
yeah.
A stands for. And so when you talk about cannabis, right, and you talk about the opportunities, and you talk about the science that goes into it, and the technology, which is huge, I'm sure, right, there's also the art that has been a part of the culture.
Yep.
And a part of what we as African Americans have celebrated that goes with cannabis. So as far as opportunities for young people, you know, obviously they're endless, but they definitely should be placed in the very forefront of where our society is looking at emphasizing opportunities. And so I do want to applaud you in what you're doing, you know, in being this leader. And you know, your name is probably going to go down in the annals of history in 20 years, talking about, oh, there was the first, right? And you will be a role model, the way that you are sort of shifting the way that we all are thinking about this, thinking about cannabis in general. And as you said, it's, you know, marijuana has been the name that's been used, and it has a very pejorative, very negative connotation, though I would think there's some musicians who might have a different viewpoint on that.
Absolutely.
But the idea of cannabis and uplifting sort of the business perspective of this plant. And I was fascinated when you said that they were female, right? Like I just completely learned something.
Absolutely.
And so those are the things that I think will, in circling back to what you were saying, lead the next generation, right? Like looking beyond sort of where we've been before and the opportunities. With technology, we see the changes that the millennials have to navigate. We see the opportunity for social change and social justice. Black Lives Matters is completely led by millennials, right?
Yeah.
The three sisters who started it were not of the generation that had marched. This is a generation that responded in a different way. So I think one of the things the millennials have is opportunity. Every generation has opportunity, but I think the millennials have a different opportunity, you know, in the sense that in many ways, we don't think of restrictions and borders simply because technology has moved so rapidly. What many of us think of as what is probably not even what a millennial thinks of as what is, you know. I talked about using a remote control for a television today, and my students knew. But then I thought about it, I said, really, their younger siblings won't know. It'll all be about the cell phone, right? They won't even know what a remote control is, never mind the fact that at some point, years ago, we all had to get up and go change the dial, right? Or be the child that was sent to change the dial, which I'm sure many of us were. So I just think about my students. I do think that, you know, every generation really needs to know its history. And I think now with technology, which has helped us learn things like DNA tracing and looking at slave ships that have been looked at through different research and different artifacts that have benefited from the changes in technology, I think the access to history is greater. And so I'm hoping that this generation is able to tap into learning about the broader, larger history and using that to build sort of the future so that we continue what we know. And you know, it's just so funny when you were talking about cannabis, I'm thinking, well, what about the peanut, right? And just thinking, well, what if we hadn't really had an African-American man who was interested in exploring the peanut? Where would we be today, right?
Interesting. Peanut butter sandwich.
For me, it's different because I'm trying to adjust to them. My generation has been very critical of the millennials.
Yeah.
And for me, I've kind of taken that step back and looked at these young men and saying, well, hold on a second. When I grew up, we did something as simple as taking the lawnmower out of my grandmother's backyard, going to get some gas, filling it up, going to your house and saying, hey, can I cut your grass for $10? Well, that no longer exists for them. They don't have to go and do that hard labor. I watched my son take a hat, put an embroidery on there, and put it on the internet and sell it to a kid in India for $25. So the technology has changed. And the way we look at things and the way they're doing things, we as a little bit older generation have to adjust to them as well because they don't have to go through the struggles that we did. When I was growing up, I had a library card, right? I had to go to the library and do a book report, and it took me 2 or 3 days to get that book report. These guys now, they look up something, Siri, can you tell me what it is? And they tell them everything they want to know within minutes. So they have a little bit more time, and I think we have to adjust to them as well, and to accommodate them a little bit and understand what they're going through.
Sure.
I was thinking about this the other day. There's some 9-year-old kid who's never seen a white president before. So for 8 years, that 8-year-old, as they can see, they've only seen an African American president. They don't know what it's like to see a different race of a president. So, I have to really slow down and understand where they're coming from. We have totally two different perspectives. I grew up thinking we'll never see an African American president, and here they are, 9-year-olds going, hold on a second here, what happened? So it's one of those things that I try to keep that perspective very open for them, and because they are the future, and they move in a different light.
So when you go back in the community that you were raised in here in West Las Vegas, and you see and hear the stories of many of our kids drowning in despair academically, doing a lot of things that are not appropriate, that will get them in a lot of trouble. What is it that sparks your interest to say, I gotta get out and do something. I gotta be the change I wanna see?
For me, I really feel like that, I played college basketball, and I felt like I thought I was at least a decent leader. And I feel like I think we need some leadership in our community that doesn't just talk about things. And I think showing the action, showing that finances don't always mean everything. Everyone thinks that you have to have money to make a difference. And I really, truly believe that you don't have to have money to make a difference. You can lead by example. And I feel like, worshiping the money. I know a lot of guys, and that's what I mean by I don't want to ever worship the money. I worship my relationship that I have with you or you. I want to put those things in the forefront. I think we're starting, if we get back to having principles and morals and ethics, I think that it'll really start to take our kids and let them understand that there's nothing wrong with living on the West Side, and we can start our own businesses and we can do those things. And we can help each other. And I just wanted to let them know that no matter what you think financially I have, that doesn't matter. I'm here for you. I'm going to help you get through those situations. And I just think it's important that we teach them. Our kids are a little different. They're antsy. I watched a gentleman by the name of Anthony Pullum teach a class one day, and I went in and I saw his kids. They were very antsy, and they were just sitting there, and the kids tapping his leg. And Mr. Pullum I came back about a week later. Mr. Pullum basically showed me with the kids outside, and that same kid, they were doing the math on the concrete. And now he's free to roam, he's engaged, and I think we need to take probably a little different approach and start understanding our kids once again a little bit more.
Very nice. Ladies, let me ask you this, and I'll come back to you, Larry, as well. Black history. Why are we celebrating Black history?
Because
is it necessary that we take February? I mean, why February? I mean, I'm sure you all have heard this question before. Why is February do we just stop and commemorate and highlight and celebrate in February, but March 1st, what do we do? What's your thought, Ms. Simmons?
Well, I'm thinking we celebrate Black history because it's not taught. It's not included in the history books. Or if some little tidbit is included, it's misconstrued. It doesn't tell the whole story. So that's our opportunity to share that information in an organized way.
So does it trouble you to know that the history you were a part of, it gets missed or overlooked? Because a lot of kids don't get it and they're not exposed to it.
It is troubling because, in my opinion, if you don't have a broad view about the people, the ethnic groups and whatever in your community, you are in fact miseducated. That's what I think.
Okay. What do you think, Dr. Taylor?
I
saw this response from you.
Is loves the idea of celebrating.
Yes.
But I love sort of understanding it's 365 and it's not just the
28.
Is it 28 days?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, right. You know, and I think Dr. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson,
Yes.
who started Negro History Month, a week.
That's true.
And he chose February
Yes.
because it was the birth month of both Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Their birthdays are 2 days apart. But it was students that uplifted it to a month-long celebration at Kent
the whole
State,
month.
right? And that took place about 1970, right? So they said, hey, we need a whole month. There's more than just a week's worth
Can't get it
of
done
history.
in a week.
And then I want to just say, really, it's classroom teachers who continue the legacy and integrate Black history throughout the year, right? I mean, other folks do it too. Our poets do, you know, business leaders do, but really it's the teachers who are also saying, in a math class, you know, you have these Black mathematicians, and that's talked about when you're talking about algebra, right? Or similarly, when you talk about chemistry, or similarly when you talk about art, right? And that integration is really what is needed, because that's how people remember things, and that's how things become just as important as the dominant narrative, right? If it's integrated into every aspect of what students learn. And I mean from pre-K all the way through college. My students are oftentimes very thirsty or hungry or really want to know about Black history because it is not taught. It's not taught very well oftentimes, or it's taught in a very disjointed way. And so just circling back to say your story and your experience, that is a very amazing experience, and it's a lived experience. And more times than not, I think Black history is thought of in a disconnected way, that it wasn't real people doing oftentimes ordinary and sometimes extraordinary things that has created the legacy of the history that we have.
And I can say, Ms. Simmons, you are living history. I love that, lived history. I love that. For each of you, if there's anything you could go down in history being known for, what would that be? When generations to come and generations unborn flip through a book, and there's your face, bam! What do you want to be known for?
I would want to be known for one who always contributed to the advancement of others.
Nice. Beautiful.
I'm kind of like, I want to be you. You have a whole school named after you. You know, your legacy is there because of all the amazing things that you did. You know, I think touching a child's life is the greatest gift. And you having the school saying, this is what I am passionate about and I live my life to do. Wow.
Amazing.
That's pretty amazing. So I don't even know after saying
Ms.
all
Simmons,
that.
that deserves a fist bump.
Oh,
There you go.
thank you.
That's right. I'm with her. I mean, I think that's.
We all want to be you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, she summed it
That's
up.
fine
I mean,
with
you know,
me.
I mean, just someone that was unselfish and that was willing to help others, advance other people, and give them a better quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely amazing. And we've heard so many people talking about changing the paradigm in terms of the mindset and how do we get our next generation to understand you can own your own business. You can be a Dr. Taylor and an adjunct professor. You can have a school named after you if you're willing to just work hard and touch the lives of other people and share the gifts that God has bestowed upon each of us. How do we change this paradigm so that we can get our kids to realize the school to prison pipeline is real and it doesn't have to have your name on it if you're willing to do the right thing even when no one's watching? How do we do that?
First, I think we have to recognize that we have some people in prison who are there because they were put in a trip bag. I think we need to acknowledge that. You read occasionally in the paper about an individual who's been in prison for 15, 25 years, and with the advent of DNA testing, all of a sudden, they gotta let them go.
I would say one thing we need to do is really change the system, right? There's so many things that are fractured about our system, our judicial system, our educational system, our social system. One thing I want to circle back to is HBCUs, right? So I would say almost hands down, every student from the beginning of the first student who stepped into an HBCU did not step in alone, right? They stepped in with family, they stepped in with community, they stepped in with teachers, they stepped in with others who guided them, supported them, oftentimes paid their bills, kept them fed, housed them, supported them, celebrated them, encouraged them, helped navigate when they made transition from going to college, maybe to moving to a place that had no other support system, went out through the church networks to find somebody. And that's something that we need to continue and we need to do in greater measures. So I think the idea of community and community support, circling back to your themes, right, is really important. And I don't know that we have those frank conversations that we're not doing enough. I think the legacy that all of our foremothers and forefathers gave to us is that you can't do it alone, right? You cannot do it alone. And unless we both do what we can to be excellent and then support those who are with us, we as a people are always going to continue to struggle.
Mine is more the mentality, changing the mentality. I go back to worshiping the money. You know, as a kid, you grow up and you see a guy on the corner, he's hustling, he's got a pocket full of money, you aspire to be that way. And I think that once we change that mentality to say, wait, hold on a second here. Because what happens is when we aspire to be that, then we put ourselves in that system. And if we kind of change that around by going in our backyards and digging a couple of rows and planting our own seeds and starting to tomato and greens, and now our focus goes from, hey man, I can't wait for my crop of greens to come up. And I know Commissioner Weekly, he has some good tomatoes down the street, so I'm gonna go trade my greens for. So now we start shifting the mentality of, once again, of focusing it off the money and getting our kids to understand that that's not the way to go. Some of the greatest things in my life have nothing to do with finances. And once we start teaching our youth that, and they'll understand that we can do things without a financial gain, and not everything puts us down that road to where we have to make decisions because we want to have the best Gucci belt on or whatever it is that they're striving to attain. And I just think that for me, changing the mentality, letting them know that they can do it, is a big thing for me.
Okay. So there is a song that I know George Benson sang the song, Whitney Houston sang the song, and we've heard other folks karaoke the song, The Greatest Love of All. And in that song it says, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Do you think we miss the love and are singing in our headphones Roberta Flack, Where is the Love? What do you think?
Well, I think little children get a sense of self based on their experiences with others. So we all need to have integrity and demonstrate integrity when we're dealing with children. I was a first, second grade teacher. I never wanted to go higher than that. In the first place, they all love you just because you're their teacher. And in the second place, you have such an opportunity to lay a foundation.
There you go. That's right. That's right. What do you think?
It's interesting to see my students struggle sometimes. You know, at UNLV, you have less than 10% who are African American. And so they're unique. They're in a unique space. And I hear their struggles both internally about seeing who they are, and you know, it's a time period when we're all learning, you know, when you are at that 18 to 24, but also understanding in the larger sense of some of the real barriers and challenges because of who they are as African Americans that they're going to face, right? And really understanding that their identity has to be stronger, right? Their sense of self has to be stronger because there's going to be many challenges and obstacles that society places on them. And so supporting them in that, also sort of supporting them in understanding that they always have the option to make changes and do something different. you know. And I think about those semesters when a student's really struggling and saying, you know, this is just one semester, life happens. It's not the end all that be all, but do understand that you are in a unique space, that you are part of a small minority, and so you do almost have a responsibility to succeed, but you can't do it without asking for help.
You know, my grandmother, I remember my grandmother at 12 years old telling me that at that point I knew right from wrong. And, you know, the thing that I missed after she passed on was that she would nurture me and give me that love. And I think that, like she said, that our kids, that love is there, man. We need to supply our kids with that love and affection. And sometimes I think we're too busy working and doing other things, and our kids miss out. And I think it's very important that we start giving them that love that they truly, truly, truly need, because they want it. At the end of the day, they want it. And I go back to my grandmother telling me I knew right from wrong. And as I got older, she instilled those things into me. So when I came up in my high school days and everyone was drinking and I was going, you know that's wrong, right? And as much as I wanted to fit in, I understood that was peer pressure being applied, and I chose not to do it because my grandmother taught me what was right and what was wrong.
You knew.
And I knew. So there was no excuse for me not to. Right. And if I did something wrong, I always tried to accept my consequences because she told me, you know, there's nothing in this world that you're not going to face, that you're not going to know what's right and wrong. Yeah. And so building that foundation of love is very important for us.
All right. We have a few more minutes before we wrap here for the day, but I do want to ask y'all, if you had to think of someone in history and you had an opportunity to spend about 5-10 minutes with a max, who would it be?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. Why? What would you say to Muhammad?
Thank you. Thank you for just having the morals and principles to stand up for what he truly believed in, because I think we definitely lack that nowadays.
Great choice. Okay. What about you, Doc?
Probably a little lesser known, Egyptian physician, and Shep, and I may have just bungled the name, but why I loved her is she was what would be called a radical black feminist before the term. She taught about 2,000 other women to be physicians, which was completely radical. She was persecuted, etc. So just having knowledge, passing on that knowledge, empowering others, I think would be a fabulous conversation to have.
And try to say the name one more time.
I'm seeing in my mind, is it Persichet? And I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But
all right, there you go. Yes, ma'am.
Dorothy Irene Height.
Dorothy Height, okay.
She was a woman who knew no boundaries.
Yeah.
Managed the affairs that she wanted to advance with grace and integrity. And I'd love to be thought of as Dorothy Irene Height.
Wow.
I had the privilege of working for her.
Nice.
You did?
I did, a National Council of Negro Women.
All right, well, you two are going to have to go to lunch or something and really scrap this up. But this is great. I'm really so happy that, Clark County and our Public Information's Office have afforded us this opportunity through the month of February to highlight some outstanding contributions and talk about things that's very pertinent in our community. Education is something that we really have to nail home for our children and for our families. When you look at the education system here in Nevada, it's pretty sad on our part that our children are at the bottom of the list, which tells us we have a lot more work to do.
Absolutely. That's true.
Yeah. And then just getting our communities to understand economics. Everybody else does it.
Right.
Everybody else gets out and supports businesses in their community. Why can't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much more for us to learn. Science, technology, you name it. It's a gold mine out there for us. But y'all,
changing that mentality.
Changing the mentality.
Going back to when I was growing up, it was basketball, football, and then maybe rapping came along at the end. But once again, if we change that, scientists make a lot of money in the cannabis field. Growers make a lot of money in the cannabis field. So these are sustainable lifetime jobs that they can have. and science. You know, I would love to, one of the things I would love more than ever is to be able to mentor a young man or woman, a young child, and let them grow up and then find the cure for lupus through cannabis or HIV, whatever it may be. I would love to see that happen.
We, of course, would like to thank the City of Las Vegas for allowing us to use this beautiful facility here, the West Las Vegas Cultural Arts Center, under the leadership of the Dr. Marsha Robinson and her team here. And of course, we're so very grateful to Clark County's very own Public Information Office team for helping us to highlight this wonderful, wonderful tribute here today. Thank you for allowing me, Lawrence Weekly, your Clark County Commissioner, and these wonderful community trailblazers to come into your home to highlight Black History Month. Of course, blacks in America have contributed so many great things to our society, from inventions like the traffic light and medicine to treat glaucoma and arthritis, and of course, the first African-American United States president. Of course, we're an amazing people who make strides daily to help our country be the powerhouse that it is. And with that, I leave you with the spoken word from Clark County Poet Laureate, Bo Robinson. Please enjoy Black History Month and experience all that this great county has to offer. Thank you.
This is Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed down with lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your lies, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? But does it come as a surprise that I dance like I got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of a slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.